Star Wars loves to tell you it's about freedom. You've got lightsabers clashing, Death Stars exploding, rebels overthrowing tyrants. But underneath all of that, there's something far uglier, hiding in plain sight: slavery. And the saga barely talks about it. From the moment we meet Anakin Skywalker as a boy on Tatooine, Star Wars quietly admits the galaxy is built on chains. And then it just moves on, as if that detail isn't one of the most horrifying truths in the story. The Republic knows it exists but ignores it. The Jedi sense everything but never act on it. The rebels promise liberty but never deliver it universally. It's the galaxy's greatest shame, swept under the rug every single time. And when you start lining up the examples, it gets disturbing fast. Wookiees forced into labour camps, spice mines on Kessel filled with slaves, droids fitted with restraining bolts and memory wipes. Even children being trafficked in corners of the galaxy the heroes never visit. Suddenly the fight for freedom feels less like a noble cause and more like a selective slogan. A slogan that conveniently ignores the beings who never get rescued. The irony is that slavery isn't some hidden corner of canon. It's everywhere. From movies to shows to comics, it keeps popping up, only to be quietly pushed aside so we can get back to space battles and chosen one prophecies. And that silence is the real horror. Because the galaxy doesn't just live with slavery, it depends on it. That's what makes Star Wars darker than most people realise. It's not just about good versus evil, it's about comfort versus conscience. Heroes love talking about freedom, but they're disturbingly comfortable leaving whole groups in chains. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. In this video, we're going to uncover the hidden story of slavery across Star Wars, how it shapes characters like Anakin and Chewbacca, why the Jedi and Republic looked the other way, and what this silence tells us about the galaxy's ugliest truth, that the fight for freedom was never really won. When people think of Star Wars, they think of lightsabers, starfighters, and maybe that one weird cantina band that never stops playing. But underneath the spectacle is a truth the saga almost never confronts. Slavery built the galaxy. It's not just a background detail, it's the invisible foundation that explains how so much of Star Wars even functions. And the strangest part is how casually the films treat it. We're introduced to Anakin Skywalker, the supposed chosen one, as a literal slave child, and then the story just moves on. Think about it. The prequels show us that Tatooine is crawling with slave markets, kids wearing transmitters in their bodies like cattle, and nobody seems particularly outraged. Qui-Gon doesn't free all the slaves, he just frees Anakin and walks away like it's a regular Tuesday. Padme, queen of a planet that prides itself on democracy, meets Shmi Skywalker and sympathises with her. But when she becomes a senator, she never actually does anything about slavery. It's one of those galactic contradictions that makes the Republic look hypocritical before Palpatine even takes over. What's worse is that slavery isn't limited to backwater systems. The Clone Wars series shows us entire worlds, like Kessel, where slaves are worked to death in spice mines. The Wookiees are rounded up and sold as forced labour during both the Republic and Imperial eras. Even in the Bad Batch, we see children being trafficked and sold, while the so-called guardians of peace and justice are too busy debating in Senate halls. When you line it up, slavery isn't just a side issue, it's everywhere. And that's what makes it horrifying. Because when something is everywhere, it becomes invisible. The Jedi know it exists, but rarely intervene unless it directly touches their mission. The Republic pretends it doesn't happen because admitting it would prove their moral authority is hollow. The Separatists exploit it openly, using slaves to build droid factories while accusing the Republic of hypocrisy. And the Empire, well, they turn slavery into a state policy. Labour camps, chain codes, even entire species being subjugated into service. So what does that say about Star Wars? It says the galaxy is built on chains no one wants to acknowledge. And it makes you look at the story differently. Because for all the talk about balance in the Force, or the fight between good and evil, freedom is never universal. Not for the Wookiees, not for the Twi'leks, not for the nameless kids on desert planets who never get rescued. And the Jedi, Republic, and even the rebels carry that guilt by choosing not to make it the centre of their fight. The irony of Star Wars is that the people we're supposed to root for are often the ones ignoring slavery the hardest. The Jedi, those legendary space monks, claim to fight for peace and justice. But when Anakin is discovered as a slave, they free him only because he's strong in the Force. His mother is left behind, and no council member seems bothered by the fact that the Chosen One's childhood is defined by human trafficking. It's like buying half a car and pretending the other half doesn't exist. This selective morality haunts the entire saga, because the Jedi constantly present themselves as defenders of freedom, but they are silent when entire populations are chained. Yoda can sense the disturbance in the Force across the galaxy, but apparently not the sound of millions of slaves screaming. Mace Windu can lecture politicians about democracy, but he doesn't lift a finger when children are being bought and sold. And that contradiction is part of why Anakin grows so bitter. The people who claim to stand for good only care when it benefits their order. Then there's the Republic. We're told it represents liberty, yet it actively allows slavery to persist in places like Tatooine, because that's outside our jurisdiction. Which is just a fancier way of saying, not our problem. The Republic has fleets, armies, and Jedi who can cross entire galaxies in hours, but when it comes to freeing people in chains, suddenly they believe in local sovereignty. That hypocrisy is staggering, and it's no wonder Palpatine could point at the Republic and call it rotten to the core. Because in this case he wasn't wrong. Even the rebels who love waving the flag of freedom are guilty of this same blindness. Mon Mothma and Bail Organa give fiery speeches about liberty. But there's no grand campaign to end slavery after the Empire falls. The New Republic spends more time demilitarizing its fleet than addressing the fact that slavery still exists on the same desert worlds where Anakin grew up. It's as if freedom in Star Wars has always meant freedom for some, not for all. And that double standard undercuts the entire mythos. And yes, it makes the whole saga darker when you think about it. Because the Jedi fight wars, the Republic makes laws, and the rebels blow up Death Stars, but none of them actually address the root of oppression. They treat slavery as a background detail instead of the main horror that fuels the galaxy. Which means the so-called heroes are not only complicit, they're comfortable with injustice as long as it stays out of sight. That's not just oversight, that's hypocrisy on a galactic scale. If you really want to understand the horror of slavery in Star Wars, you have to look at its legacy on characters and entire species. Anakin's entire arc begins with chains, and you could argue his obsession with control and fear of loss is rooted in his childhood as a slave. He wasn't just a boy dreaming of pod racing, he was a boy who knew his life and his mother's life could be taken at any moment. That trauma doesn't disappear, it mutates. And when you look at Darth Vader, you see someone trying to escape chains by becoming the one holding them. The Wookiees are another example. Chewbacca isn't just Han Solo's loyal sidekick, he's a survivor of enslavement. The Empire used his species as labour, and his personal life debt to Han is more than friendship. It's a consequence of a galaxy that never gave his people true freedom. That backstory gives Chewie's loyalty a tragic weight, because it's not just companionship, it's gratitude, born from oppression. And yet the films never highlight this directly, almost as if the saga is too afraid to make audiences dwell on the horror. Even the droids in Star Wars raise questions about slavery that the films dance around but never answer. C-3PO and R2-D2 are treated as property, sold, traded, and memory wiped, despite clearly having personalities and emotions. The very fact that restraining bolts exist shows that droid servitude is normalized and nobody blinks at it. The galaxy doesn't even acknowledge droids as living beings, which means one of the largest exploited groups is erased from moral consideration entirely. It's slavery hidden under the guise of technology. And then there's the uncomfortable fact that nothing ever really changes. The Republic falls, the Empire rises, the New Republic takes over. But slavery persists in some form across every era. Which makes you wonder, was the rebellion ever really about freedom? Or was it just about changing who got to sit on the throne? Because if the system still tolerates chains, then the victory is incomplete. The Death Star may have been destroyed, but the galaxy's ugliest institution remained standing. This is the true horror of Star Wars, the one nobody talks about. That beneath all the Jedi philosophy and all the blaster fights, there are billions of beings who never get saved, never get freed, and never even get mentioned. And maybe that's the scariest lesson of all. That the galaxy far, far away isn't actually about freedom versus tyranny. It's about who gets to ignore the suffering as long as their own cause looks righteous. And if that doesn't make you rethink Star Wars, nothing will.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.